Hello everyone, and welcome to week 3 of our fall small group series on the Beatitudes. Our two Beatitudes for consideration this week are Beatitudes 5 and 6, which read as follows. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy, and blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. With the sixth Beatitude, blessed are the merciful, we move closer into the realm of commands or imperatives. The first few Beatitudes, which talk about poverty of spirit, mourning, meekness, hunger and thirst, those are more descriptive than prescriptive. In other words, they describe actual circumstances that are happening, while now we move into Beatitudes that are a little bit more of urgings or commandments or exhortations. They have a sort of implicit obligation. So when Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy, he is giving a kind of implicit obligation, telling his disciples, you ought to be merciful, because then you will ultimately be shown mercy. In other words, these Beatitudes now, from here to the end, are things that are more willfully chosen by Christ's disciples than circumstances that have been thrust upon them. So the Beatitude to show mercy promises that what goes around comes around in a certain way. The merciful will also be shown mercy. The Gospel of Matthew is very interested in this term mercy, more so than in the other Gospels. He doesn't place much limits around the call to be merciful. Jesus tells his followers to show mercy even to enemies later in the Sermon on the Mount. And the text in Matthew 25, which is, of course, paradigmatic for the Matthew 25 initiative, here at Riverside, says that the sheep and the goats, the difference between them, the sheep are righteous and the goats are not because of their willingness to show mercy to those who turn out to be Christ in the end. But the sheep show mercy to them before they even realize that, in fact, they're showing mercy to Christ himself. I think mercy begins to manifest itself in our willingness to give others the benefit of the doubt. So often we're quick to make these kind of snap judgments about others when we really have too little information about their circumstances. And when we make certain assumptions to fill holes in our narratives about people, we paint a certain picture about them that may assume the best or that may assume the worst. To show mercy is to assume the best. It's to give the benefit of the doubt. Of course, whenever we assume, we could be wrong, and we often are. But if we readily give others the benefit of the doubt, if we think well of others by default, then we have in fact begun to exhibit mercy. So it's best to not jump to conclusions, give others the benefit of the doubt, and grant them the kind of understanding and grace that you would hope that they would give to you. Show others the kind of mercy that you would hope to receive. And in doing so, Matthew says, without laying out all the details, those who are merciful generally are more likely to be on the receiving end of mercy as well when they need it. The next beatitude is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Perhaps the most difficult beatitude to interpret because it's the most vague, right? What does it mean to be pure in heart? Of course, throughout Christian history, a lot of people have speculated about what in fact that means. The early Christian ascetics thought purity of heart meant freedom from evil desires. Byzantine spirituality associated it with apathy or freedom from all worldly cares and emotions. But in Matthew's context, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, the pure in heart probably refers to the sincerity of one's encounter with God, one's inward encounter with God, and ultimately the extent of the correspondence between one's inner experience of God and the outward actions that follow from it. Jesus will say elsewhere in the Sermon on the Mount that where one's heart is, there one's treasure is also. In other words, one cannot worship God inwardly, but then have an outward action that doesn't reflect that inward conviction. The pure in heart, for example, are those who use their treasure in a way that corresponds to their complete devotion to God, and the same could be said for all of the other aspects of their life. St. Augustine talked about having a simple heart, by which he meant an undivided heart. And Soren Kierkegaard, the great Danish theologian, famously put it that purity of heart is to will one thing, namely, to will what God wills. Surely we all know what it feels like to have a divided heart, right? The feeling of wanting to be in two places at once, for instance, or the feeling of wanting to be great in more aspects of our lives than we have time to pursue, feeling not focused, wanting to go in different directions. And certainly the cares and temptations of life can prompt us to be pushed to and fro about our most fundamental devotion to what's most important to us. So when we put our hearts to the test and consider the extent to which we have purity of heart, the extent to which in all areas of life we seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness is the standard we should look for. And then from there we should trust that, as Jesus said, everything else will be added as well. When we seek with a pure and undivided heart first the kingdom of God, so many other things we find take care of themselves. I hope you have a great discussion once again this week, and I'll look forward to joining you next week for Beatitudes 8 and 9.